There's a strange, unspoken truth about success. It's this thing, everyone chases it. We're all taught to believe it holds the key to a better life, right?
But how often do we actually stop, in the middle of the race, to ask ourselves that one really crucial question? What's this all going to cost me? What is the real price of this dream?
So let me tell you a story. It's about a man who got everything he ever dreamed of. The money, the respect, the power, the whole shebang. And yet, he still couldn't sleep at night.
So, how does someone end up like that? Well, to understand it, we really have to go back to the very beginning. You see, his ambition, it wasn't born from some grand inspiration. No, it was forged in scarcity. See, he didn't come from money. He wasn't even born comfortable. His childhood was this quiet collection of things that were never quite his. Borrowed books, hand-me-down clothes. He would just watch the other kids, They had this ease about them, a sense of belonging he could never quite grasp. And in that environment, you learn to survive long before you ever learn how to just live.
And right there, in all that quiet observation, he made a promise. A promise just to himself. And this wasn't just some fleeting thought. No, this became a vow. It turned into the engine of his entire life, the fuel behind every single decision he would make from that day forward. And, later in life, people would look at him and say he was focused, he was driven, destined for greatness. But they had it all wrong. They misunderstood. His drive, it wasn't some magnetic pull toward a glittering future. It was a desperate, panicked push away from a past that absolutely terrified him. So he started to climb. And as he did, he found that each step up, well, it required him to leave a little piece of himself behind. Success demands sacrifice. That's what he told himself. It was his mantra. And boy, was he successful. It started small. One little deal, then another. But soon, the deals got bigger. The money, it really started to flow. And suddenly, doors that had always been bolted shut just swung wide open for him. And for the very first time in his life, he felt what it was like to have power. And he made a crucial mistake. He mistook that feeling for happiness. But then, slowly, almost so you wouldn't even notice it, something inside of him began to shift. He got sharper, sure, more efficient, but also colder. Conversations weren't about connecting with people anymore. They were about gaining an advantage. His whole way of looking at the world changed. Time, it wasn't for living anymore. It was for spending. You spent it on things that gave you a return on investment. And emotions? Well, in his new calculus, emotions were just weaknesses. They were distractions from the goal. I'm too busy. That became his go-to line, his constant excuse. His parents got older, he was too busy. His best friends, they eventually just stopped calling. He barely even noticed. There was someone who loved him deeply, but she got tired of waiting for a later that never seemed to arrive. He kept telling himself, I'll fix it all later. The thing is, later just never came. And then, one day, it happened. He arrived. He was finally standing at the very top of the mountain he'd spent his whole life climbing. And the view, it was exactly as he had always imagined. But it was utterly desolate. I mean, look at what he had, the luxury, the influence, the power. He was, by every external measure, the man he'd always dreamed he would be. But his home, the one that was supposed to be the symbol of his arrival, it was just a showcase, a museum, and it was missing all the things that actually make a house a home. The applause from the world, it was deafening. Success makes a lot of noise. But in the quiet moments, in the spaces between the meetings, the deals, the awards, there was just this profound, echoing silence. Now, a realization like this, it doesn't usually hit you like a lightning bolt. No, for him, it just crept in. One very ordinary night, sitting alone in his perfectly designed, perfectly empty home. And in that stillness, a thought landed. A simple but absolutely terrifying thought. He realized that he had spent his entire life, learning just one thing: how to win. But he had never learned how to live. Think about that. He had built an entire empire, but completely forgot to build a life. He won the whole world and lost himself completely in the process. So when he finally truly took stock,
looked at the balance sheet of his own soul, the transaction was horrifyingly clear. He had traded his inner peace for outer status. He got everything he ever thought he wanted, except the one thing, the only thing that actually matters: contentment. And then, the next morning, for the first time in years, he broke the pattern. He started a new journey. This one wasn't about climbing higher. It was about returning. He did something he probably hadn't done in decades. He turned his phone off. Just off. He got in his car, and he just drove. No destination, nowhere to be. And then he started making calls, reaching out to the ghosts of the life he'd abandoned. And, some people answered, some didn't. But for the first time, he kept trying. Because he finally understood the most fundamental truth of all. Money, status, power, you can lose all of it and you can get it back. But time is the one currency that once you spend it, it is gone forever. You can't earn it back. So his story, it really leaves us with something to think about, doesn't it? That life isn't some race you win by leaving everyone else behind. Ambition, it's a powerful, incredible force. But without balance, all it does is build you a beautiful prison. And it really forces you to ask yourself, when you finally get to the top of that mountain you fought so hard to climb, and you turn around to celebrate, who's going to be standing there with you? Because winning alone, well, it still feels a lot like losing.